Perfect. Thank you very much, Monica, for that kind introduction. And I think there's a bit of battle tonight in who has the poshest title in their designation. But fear not, there's more beyond whatever title we wear in our organizations. There's a deep passion for purpose-driven organizations and a deep passion for how we shift our leadership to be purpose-led and a lot of the learnings that will come throughout that. So thank you again for joining us tonight for this session dedicated to fellows and senior practitioners of CAPD, and obviously open to anyone outside of the CAPD community as well. For the past few years, there has been a considerable interest in the notion of purposeful organizations, driven by the growing levels of distrust and disillusionment with what it often regards to be as short-termist financial imperatives driving contemporary firms. Typically, attributes of purposeful organizations look at the elements of societal responsibility, values, and ethics, but simply transferred into the qualities that characterizes these unique and ideal leaders. Now, there's a clear connection between purpose-driven organization and purposeful leadership. And if you look into the literature and a lot of the practice that's out there, there's a distinct connection in how these things fit into the context of organizations and societies. And for tonight's session, what we thought we're going to explore actually the both sides of the coin. We'll do a bit of exploration of what purposeful leadership looks like, and how that fits into the context of organizations. Then we look at purpose-driven organizations and in the whole entirety of what they mean, what they are, and what they feel like for employees, and also bring a lot of evidence and a lot of case studies, bring an amazing case study from Unilever to show you a bit of the journey of how organizations get there, and a lot of learning points as well. So equipping you with the right tools and the right methodologies of how you can follow in the same steps as some other organizations as well. As Monica mentioned, my name is Ciprian Arhire. Currently, I am a senior consultant on the future of HR for Capgemini Event, and my other hat that I wear in, I was going to say my part-time job in my free time is I lead on the Fellows and Senior Practitioners Network across CAPD London, and also run the small OD network for CAPD London as well. And that is because I am passionate about how we drive more knowledge, more evidence-based practice across the people profession, how we support the growth of a community of people professionals, and how we distill learning sessions like the one that we've designed for today into the profession to elevate our practice across I was going to say across London, but I think it goes beyond that, as I've seen in the chat that there's someone joining us from Bahamas as well. So how we shift the people practices across the globe, if I'm allowed to say that. So with me, I have two amazing people that I've met throughout my journey of looking for more purposeful organizations, of understanding how it connects with the almost like how organizations fit into the environment, and how we're driving that through purposeful leadership. And I have Sarah Rozenthuler with me, who is an author, chartered psychologist, leadership consultant, and dialogue coach. And if you've read the descriptions and the multiple emails you would have received about this event, you'd have seen some of the latest publication that I think I have here around me from Sarah, which is a book called Power by Purpose, which is going to take us a bit through sort of the stories that are embedded in this book today. And then to complement what Sarah is going to take us through, I have Patrick Hull joining us today, which again has a very snazzy title of VP of HR Future for Unilever. Again, it's not a battle of the titles. I think it's more of an exploration of the topic that we're doing today. Now, Paddy has spent most of his career looking at leadership development, how organizations move into this space, shifting Unilever as a whole organization into a purpose-driven organization. And he's going to tell us the story of and the journey of Unilever from leadership to employees, and how some of that work is actually distilled into the market, and the impact that Unilever creates in this space. Now, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, this is my LinkedIn page, so you can just pick up your phone and scan that QR code in the corner. More than happy for us to stay connected and continue the conversation about purposeful leadership and purpose-driven organizations offline as well. And for today's session, if I can move to my next slide, we're still at the intersection where we're covering a bit of that, why we need purpose-driven organizations and what does that mean for us. Then I'm just going to hand over to Sarah Rozenthuler in a few minutes' time to talk about some of the findings and her experience that are all embedded in this amazing book called Power by Purpose. So from purposeful leadership to purpose-driven organizations. Paddy's going to take on the virtual stage afterwards, taking us through that Unilever journey and becoming a purpose-driven organization. Close to the end, we'll do a panel discussion where we're going to pick up any questions that you're putting in the chat between 5 minutes ago and until Paddy continues finishes his presentation and beyond. And then if you're keen, and this is the optional part, which is why it's blue on the screen, if you're keen after 7:30, you can stay with us for another 25 to 30 minutes into breakout rooms where we're going to facilitate a bit of networking. And when I mean facilitate is almost like you're being put into a breakout room with other peer professionals that are in this webinar, and you're allowed to have networking related conversations. You can talk about anything, whether it's purpose-driven organization or how you're handling the current circumstances that you're in, or anything that's on your mind as a people professional today. Perfect. So when we're talking about purpose-driven organizations, like these two elements come to mind of the leadership, purpose-driven, purposeful leadership, and purpose-driven organizations, and they're intertwined in how they fit together. And I think what we're sometimes forgetting is this element of the context in which they operate together and how they feed that into the market. So what is the wider purpose of the organization in shifting that societal change, that wider the purpose besides keeping the organization in business and generating revenue or having a positive impact on the internal stakeholders. And this is something that I just wanted to flash at you. I'm not going to take you through it, but this is the Golden Circle from Simon Sinek's Start With Why, where he talks about how purpose fits at the core of this diagram that he's created. So a few organizations actually understand that their purpose of why it is they do what they do, and that is how they actually get connected better into the market to drive higher return, higher revenue, higher engagement from their people, and higher brand advocacy. I'm going to skip off the next slide because I think I'm going to come to that at the end. I wanted to flag to you before we get started some of the work that CPD has done already on purposeful leadership, and this is a report from 2017, looking at sort of how purposeful leadership is being constructed and what it looks like in the market in the UK. So you'll see in there just 21% of managers in the UK rate themselves highly on purposeful leadership, which is a bit lower than you would expect. And that was even in 2017. You'll see the construct of purposeful leadership continuing, having that element of the moral self, the commitment to stakeholders, and that vision that are key in building purposeful leadership in the context of how CFD conducted this research and how it engages to employee outcomes. And there's a clear connection and link between purposeful leadership and employees' perception that the leaders behave ethically although the relationships is complex and varies across organizational contexts. Now, you will receive these slides, and I've embedded some links in there, both for the technical report as well for the discussion paper on purposeful leadership. But there's a bit more of purposeful leadership besides this element of how it feeds into organizations. So I don't want you to start on this journey thinking that you're trying to shift your organization to be more focused on purpose just for the benefit of the internal stakeholders. I think that's one element to it. And I wanted to bring to your attention a bit of another work that actually Capgemini has done in this space, just in the midst of the pandemic last year, looking at sort of customer and consumer behavior around purposeful leadership and how purpose-driven organizations actually drive higher advocacy, drive higher investment from customers and consumers. So picking up some of those market elements of it's not just good for people, it's good for business, it's good for societies, it's good for sustainability, and actually drives higher return today, as well as positions your organization as being an investor into the future. Now, I have embedded a lot of comments in here of why these consumers have higher expectations, how that's connected with the behavior around response to COVID, or how it's connected with sort of the response to the Black Lives Matter movement and other elements of how employees feel about that, and how consumers come from external organizations and they talk about some of their changing behaviors and how they interact with organizations that are purposeful versus organizations that are not purposeful. I am not going to take you through all of this because I think that it's going to add too much data to the storytelling that we're going to do tonight. But I have embedded these into the slides together with a link to the report if you want to have a look at it. And while you're bringing the state to the attention of the CEO, you can have a bit of data, a bit of story, a bit of case studies. So you have the full pack of everything that you need to deliver to a CEO to convince them that purpose-driven organizations is the way forward. Perfect. And now I'm just going to go to invite Sarah Rozenthuler on this virtual stage to take over from me. Sarah and I had some very interesting conversations, and I think she saw me in a moment where I was able to talk for about 15 minutes without breathing about purpose-driven organizations and how passionate I am about this topic. And then after I finished that, I was like, what do you think? And she kindly accepted when she saw me in my flow talking about this, she kindly accepted to be part of tonight's event, which I am so grateful that you're joining us. But I'm just going to hand over to you to do a bit of an introduction of who you are, how you fell in love with purpose-driven organizations, and what you've been doing around this space ever since. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Chip, and thank you, Monica, and all the CIPD team who could make this event happen. I'm delighted to be here. A very warm welcome to you wherever in the world you are. And I've been seeing a bit in the chat, so whether you're in Cape Town or the Bahamas, Saudi Arabia, and lots of people connecting in from the UK and other places. So very warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here to talk about a topic that, as Chip has said, it's close to my heart, and it's very much of this time, as I'm sure you're aware. And I think purpose is becoming something of, we could say, a superpower at the moment. I think that's been heightened by the COVID pandemic. I think people are increasingly examining why they go to work, what gets them up out of bed in the morning and puts a spring in their step. And I think there's increasing competition between organizations wanting to attract the best talent and purpose can help with that. And I think there's growing pressure from some regulators and some investors that business should have a purpose and a reason for being beyond simply making profits. And I think this has been demonstrated by a recent story in the news. You may also have been following it. And I think this story shows that the journey to becoming purpose-driven isn't straightforward. So I've been watching events unfold at Danone, where the board of directors decided to replace Emmanuel Faber as the CEO and chairman. They were bowing to pressure from activist investors who were concerned that Danone wasn't keeping up with its competitors. And I think in their decision, we've lost a powerful advocate for purpose-driven business. Faber really was a voice that championed a stakeholder model, a multi-stakeholder model of doing business, of more responsible capitalism. And so I think what we see there is that purpose leaders, even with this growing business case for putting purpose at the heart of a business, they can find themselves standing on fragile ground, especially when you've got these activist investors who are striving for short-term profits alone. And really what I'm interested in and what I want to share with you over the next 20-25 minutes is what are the different capacities that leaders need to embody in order to lead with purpose at scale. And in a way that's quite different from the more typical command and control styles of leadership that I think are no longer really fit for purpose in our rapidly changing digital world. So I did write the book that Chip kindly mentioned, Powered by Purpose. It was a labour of love to write. I had to be powered by purpose to write it. It took me a few years to put it all together. And I just wanted to share with you why I wrote the book. So I'm going to come to some slides a little bit later and I'll talk to those and hopefully give you some input, but a bit of a personal note to begin with. And looking back, I think my interest in purpose goes back to me being in my 20s. When I'd graduated from the University of Nottingham, I'd done a psychology degree. I'd worked for the global consultancy SHL for a year. And then the spirit of adventure got the better of me. And I decided to leave the UK and go to Spain and be an English teacher for a year. But my plans went awry. I fell on hard times. I was living in a camper van that got broken into. I lost all my possessions. I didn't get the job teaching English. And so having met all these weird and wonderful travelers, I set about starting to learn how to juggle and how to busk and how to create street shows so that I could earn my living and not come back to the UK having phoned up my parents with my tail between my legs for them to help me out to get back. And so it actually turned into a 4-year adventure. And by the end of that, I'd learned how to do a good street show, pass the hat, entertain the crowd. But something inside me was missing and my inner radar knew it. And I ended up going into quite a dark place. And I came back to the UK to have a conversation with my mum. And she said to me, "You're not fulfilled because you're not using all your talents." And I went away and I thought about what my talents might be and what I really loved to do. And I thought back to the year I'd worked as an occupational psychologist, applying evidence-based insights in the corporate world to raise performance and well-being. And anyway, I made the decision to come back to the UK. It took me a year to find a job. I did eventually get a job working back as an organisational psychologist in the civil service. And what I noticed was that gradually over time, the light started to come back on inside me. And this is the power of purpose. It lights us up. I think when we're on track doing what we feel called to do, we're energized and we're engaged in our day-to-day work. And so that's where my interest, having gone off my path and then come back onto my path and noticing the difference in my own energy levels, I think that's what got me interested in purpose to begin with. So let me talk a little bit about culture. That's our topic for this evening, a purpose-driven culture. What do we mean by culture? Well, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, defines culture in business as the habitual behaviours and mindsets that characterise an organisation. And of course, there are many aspects to a culture. How people are recruited and trained, how people are incentivized and rewarded, what the code of conduct might be in an organization. There are many, many layers to this. What I'm going to really focus on are the aspects of culture that are all about how the business thinks about their people, how they treat them, how they motivate people, and indeed the leadership of an organisation, that crucial aspect that Chip spoke about. So I am going to share my screen. I'm going to talk to some slides for a few minutes and then come back. So here we go. So I'm assuming you can see my slides there. Thank you, Paddy, getting the thumbs up. So in terms of what I'm going to cover for the rest of this talk, I'm going to talk you through what I've called in the book, the 4 capacities of purpose-led leadership, arising out of a close look at the literature and my own experience as a practitioner. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call the 3 bridges of purpose. So that's purpose at an individual, team and organisational level. I love Chip's question, who benefits from purpose? And at an individual level, we feel energised and engaged. At a team level, it creates alignment, people pull together. And at an organisational level, it generates competitive advantage. So I'll touch on those 3 bridges. And finally, I want to give you a little taste of what an experiential and an embodied approach to developing these capacities could look like. Because I think purpose is very much about aligning our head, our hearts, and our guts. So I'm very interested in the experiential. And all I'm saying with this slide here really is that I'm very much a practitioner. I'm on the corporate pitch, going into different organisations. I wrote a book a number of years ago all about how to have meaningful conversations arising out of working with different teams and different leaders. And in the book, I take a very practical focus. There is an epilogue, Empowered by Purpose, by the academic, Dr. Victoria Hirth. That part is more academic, but really my orientation is as a practitioner, what works and what doesn't work on the pitch. And so if I only had one slide to share with you, I have got a few more, but if I only had one slide about purpose-driven business, it would probably be this one. Some of you might recognize it. It's an ad that was placed in the New York Times before Black Friday by the retailer Patagonia, who sell outdoor clothing and equipment. And this ad was for real. And in their purpose, they're tackling consumerism head on. And maybe they were the only retailer ahead of Black Friday, encouraging people to think before they buy. And Patagonia hit global headlines with this campaign because they pledged to donate all the profits from their Black Friday sales to environmental campaigning organisations. They expected that they might make about $2 million, and in actual fact, they made $10 million, which they did donate. And the success of that was called by some people a fundraiser for planet Earth, because the customers of Patagonia, one of the strongest purpose-driven brands we have, love the company. And that's one of the real benefits of the purpose-driven approach, is that customers develop strong loyalty to the brand. And I think the Patagonia story really demonstrates that. And so I'm not going to go through this in any detail. I think Chip spoke to this. It's out there in various places. I cover it, Empowered by Purpose, what the benefits are, this growing business case for purpose. Some of you might also be familiar with Professor Alex Edmonds' recent book, Grow the Pie, where he's also taken a close look at the evidence for purpose-driven organisations and the benefits they experience, including these engaged and energised team members, enhanced well-being, increased levels of commitment, less intention to leave the organisation, greater resilience in the marketplace, higher rates of innovation, fresh thinking, new ideas, an expanded market share, and, as I've already spoken to, brand loyalty. So many benefits potentially. And then one of the other things that really got me thinking and then writing was when I came across this report. So this was back in 2016, and it was a report for DCMS here in the UK, stating this rather bold vision that by 2026, in 10 years' time, all UK businesses would have a purpose that includes serving society and the environment, and that the most successful businesses would be those that manifestly deliver on that mission. And I read that and I was inspired, and then the practitioner in me thought, how? You know, that is quite a pathway that is being laid out there. And around the same time, I read an article in the FT that was acknowledging the success of organisations such as Unilever, and saying, but what does the leadership involve? And the phrase they used was, it can be something of a black box. And again, that got me thinking. It made me curious about how we unpack purpose-led leadership. And so in the book, just in a way to cut to the chase, this is the definition that I give of being powered by purpose. So it's about having a clear and compelling and authentic why that contributes to long-term well-being of people and the planet. That purpose is also practical. It guides day-to-day decision-making, and it's unifying stakeholders, and in terms of the people inside the organisation, engaging and energising them to do great work. And I'd really acknowledge the contribution of Victoria Hirth, the academic I mentioned, in coming up with that definition, very influenced by her thinking. And so I set about doing an in-depth review of the literature, and also just noticing what I saw in my own work with leadership teams, coaching leaders, running leadership programs. And I distilled that into what I've called these 4 core capacities of purpose-led leadership. I'm just going to give you a headline on each one, and then come back to them in a little bit more detail. So the first one I'm calling Cultivate Leadership Presence. And this is when we're fully landed in the moment, we're not distracted, so that we can really tune into the essence of what wants to happen. And I think that's where it all begins, by us being fully present. The second capacity I've called make dialogue authentic. So this is about being able to read the room, work out what the dynamics are, how to intervene more skillfully in a conversation, have the conversations that really matter, how to navigate conflict, discomfort, and sometimes speak to the hard truths. Then the third capacity, I'm calling it engage your stakeholders. And Chip mentioned about stakeholders, some internal, some external to the organisation. And what we're seeing, I think, with purpose-led leaders is the capacity to skillfully, proactively engage stakeholders. And finally, fourth capacity, connect on purpose. So really uncover that compelling why, that enduring why that engages people and encourages them to pull together. So I will say a little bit more about these four capacities, but for the moment, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. And I can't see you, but I know you're there in our Zoom room. And I want to invite you, and this is just to take a moment really to have a sense of our fuller presence. I'm going to just invite you to get comfortable in your chair or however you're sitting. And if you're looking at the screen, I just invite you to look away from the screen. You might like to close your eyes if you wish, or you could just put your eyes in soft focus and just take a moment to put your attention inside yourself. And I'm going to invite you to just notice the rhythm of your breathing. And just making that connection with our own breathing is one simple way to be a little bit more present. I invite you to notice your posture. However you're sitting, maybe you're standing, but again, just to be aware of how your body is placed. And you might choose to sit up a little straighter, but in a relaxed way, have a little bit more verticality. And again, connecting with our physicality helps us just to be more present. And what I notice, so if you're looking away, I invite you to come back to the screen, open your eyes, be fully here in this Zoom room. I just want to say what I notice working with teams is that when teams take time, and it might just be a couple of minutes to really land and let go of the meeting they've just been at or the other call they've just been on, it really improves the quality of connection, of thinking, and of dialogue. So if I just come round to that next capacity about make dialogue authentic, when we're more present, it really helps us to be able to have those difficult conversations, or those conversations that matter most. And one of the things that's acknowledged about some of the great purpose-led leaders out there is that they're great at leaning into conversation, at listening fully, So I'm thinking of Herb Keller at Southwest Airlines, who passed away a couple of years ago, but he was renowned for his ability to listen and be authentic. And you might know Southwest Airlines have been profitable for the 45 years they've been in business, where many of their competitors like Pan Am went out of business. And it begins with the quality of human interaction and a lot of being skillful at dialogue, and dialogue being authentic is about listening fully. And when we're present, when we're able to have those conversations that really matter, I think it helps us to engage stakeholders more fully, that third capacity. And I'm thinking here in terms of a leader who's demonstrating some of this. I'm thinking of Bernard Looney, the CEO at BP. And you might know that BP has recently articulated a new purpose for themselves, so reinventing energy for people and the planet. And Bernard Looney has spoken quite openly about being perturbed by some of the anxiety levels amongst employees and investors about BP being out of step with society. And therefore needing to look at their purpose. And so really acknowledging the current reality, where stakeholders are, I think is part of being purpose-led. It sometimes involves naming hard truths. And I think it's a key part of leading with purpose. And then if I come to that fourth capacity, connect on purpose, and this is about tuning into an authentic purpose. And one of the companies that comes to mind here is the British engineering company, Brompton Cycles. So many of you may have seen the fold-up bikes on the London Underground or on tubes and trains. And Brompton Cycles' purpose is to change the way people live in cities. And it's been interesting listening to their CEO, so Will Butler-Adams, and he said that Brompton Cycles only really were able to articulate that purpose when they had sufficient, he called it global consciousness, and when their international exports had reached a particular level. That helped them to crystallize that purpose. And they're doing really well, strong financial results at Brompton Cycles and an inspiring purpose that people can connect with, that makes their day-to-day work meaningful. And so just in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to be speaking with you. I'm going to share my screen again. And I want to just give you a little bit of a taste, a little bit more of a taste of this experiential approach. How do we bring purpose alive for people in organisations? So if I come back to my slides here, I talked earlier about these 3 bridges of purpose, and I'm just going to give you a flavour at each of these levels. So the bridge of ambition, that's at the organisational level, where I think purpose can really help generate competitive advantage for an organisation. And that's an ambitious journey. I mentioned earlier, purpose at a team level helps create a greater sense of alignment. And at an individual level, when we cross the bridge to more purposeful work, we stop feeling, as I did in my 20s, kind of a bit drained and disengaged, and it enlivens us. And so at the organisational level, one of the tools that I use in my work, I developed it with my colleague, Ed Rowland, and it's an organisational purpose diamond that differentiates 4 different types of purpose, acknowledging that there's a founding purpose in an organisation. And there's a reason that the organisation was set up. I was inspired by Unilever's journey, and maybe, don't know if Paddy will speak to this, but being created, as I understand it, in Liverpool with a soap, because many of the population were at risk of cholera. And so embedded in the DNA of Unilever is a social purpose. And some organisations like Boots Optician, TSB Bank more recently have been diving into their founding purpose for inspiration, to see what might still be enduring and meaningful. And then I'm just going to go through this very quickly. We could talk about the espoused purpose of an organisation. What are the fine words on the website, the articulated purpose, which may or may not be the same as the lived purpose. So that there is what the organisation is really about, despite what it's espousing. And then in the north there, I've put the true purpose. That can evolve. That's the sort of the North Star. And I use this tool in my work to open up a dialogue. It's often with the senior team to look at those different levels of purpose and how a purpose might evolve from, say, the founding purpose into a fresher articulation of a really compelling purpose. I am going to skip over this next slide and just come to this one. So this is on the level of team purpose. And this is some fun that I have with teams where I invite them to think about an alternative role for themselves and to share that. And the reason that this works is because people then get a greater sense of their own unique contribution and other people's contribution in the team. So, for example, the head of strategy might say that they're actually the seeker of rainbow ends. These are real ones people have come up with. The head of IT, he's the make it happen guy. The receptionist, she called herself the goddess of greetings. The FD, the finance director, called himself the strategic miracle worker. The truth seeker instead of the insights director. The chief cheerleader, I wonder if you can guess who that might be. Well, that was the CEO in one organisation. The chief vibe officer, she was the head of HR. And we also had a master storyteller, the head of PR. And what this does is it creates a playful energy in the room, as well as giving insights. And when people get the energy of purpose at an individual level, I find it's easier for them to chunk up and look at purpose at a team level. What's energizing for us as a team? So when I'm working with a team, I often start at the individual level. It could be with an exercise like that. And when the energy of purpose is in the room, lighting people up, then we move to the team level. And finally, at an individual level, this is an exercise I was introduced to recently by a fellow practitioner. She's called Marie Smith. With a couple of other colleagues, Alberto Otero Gonzalez and Chris Blackwell, we've run fortnightly sessions. We call ourselves the Purpose Collective. And it's a conversation about purpose. They're free, they're interactive, people get to network. And Marie, in the session she ran for us, invited people to think about if you had a billboard, a big billboard, and you were going to put your message, the message of your leadership, your work on that billboard message, what would it be? And here's one example by one of our participants. So Kirsten Holder, her message was, the stories we tell ourselves matter, share a gentle light on yours regularly. And we had a lot of fun with this. And again, it was another angle on how we can articulate and connect with our individual purpose. There's lots more I would love to share with you. And maybe I'll just share one final thing. And that is something that somebody said to me back in the autumn. I was running a leadership program based on my book. And one of the participants there said to me, "Purpose is my anchor. It's greater than my fear." And those words really stay with me, particularly in the turbulent times that we're in, how when we connect with purpose at an individual, team and organisational level, it can really anchor us and it can really power us forward. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm assuming I hand over directly to you, Paddy. So unless Chip wants to come in here. Yeah, Chip's giving the thumbs up. So Paddy, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful hearing from you. You're a true professional in every sense of the word. I was listening to every word you said there, and I just encourage everyone listening in, make sure you get your questions into Sarah. It's not often you get someone who's really at the top of their game, you know, and you've got her undivided attention. So yeah, take use of the opportunity. It was really, really good, Sarah. And thanks to Chip and Monica and everyone at CIPD for making this possible. And thanks to all of you for joining in and taking time out of your days to come and listen to us. And shout out to all my fellow South Africans who I see are joining the call. I am a South African from Durban, where I hail from originally, but currently living in the UK, working for Unilever here. I thought I would introduce myself the way many people at Unilever introduce themselves, which is to share my purpose with you and the story behind it. A little bit like Sarah has just shown us about putting it up on a billboard. That's a little bit of the exercise we get people to do at Unilever. And my purpose is to bring the essence of Pollyanna into the room. Some of you may have heard the story of Pollyanna before. It was a book written some time ago. And I recently discovered that actually Pollyanna is now a word in the English dictionary, which stands for someone who's sort of excessively optimistic and joyful. So that might give you a bit of a clue as to what my purpose is all about and what I'm all about. So where did this purpose come from? How did I come up with this phrase about bringing the essence of Pollyanna into the room? Well, in Unilever, we run purpose workshops for people to help them discover their purpose. And in 2013, I was fortunate enough to go on one of these workshops. And I'd heard that it was an interesting, inspiring session. So I approached it with much intrigue and interest, and found that what happened was over the course of a day or so, I was in a small group of 4 of us, just sitting together, telling one another some stories. We started off telling a story about what we really enjoyed doing as a child. And for me, as it happened, it was about being on the stage and acting in plays and making the audience laugh and get a whole lot of great clapping and excitement. I happened actually to act in the play Pollyanna as a kid growing up as well. And one of the stories I related was that I was the minister in the play, and I was cast as a cantankerous, fire and brimstone sort of minister. In fact, one of my lines that I had to open with was that death comes unexpectedly, rather scary for most people in the audience. And interestingly, I realized that I didn't really want to play this role as just a mean-spirited, unhappy person. I wanted to try and find a way to inject some life and energy into the role and also still get a laugh from the audience. So I ended up inventing all sorts of mannerisms and things that this minister would have so that I could get a laugh from the audience and get across a different side to the character. And that was an interesting insight from the storytelling that my colleagues helped me realize, because I hadn't realized at the time that that was something quite unique about me, that I'd chosen to change that role to suit the kind of energy that I wanted to bring across. We also told the stories about our crucible moments in which we had been changed because of a difficult experience that we'd gone through. And I related in that some of my experience. I worked in Unilever in Shanghai and China for a few years. And I related quite a difficult experience I had in terms of understanding the cultural differences and how to work effectively with some of my Chinese colleagues. And I always thought that I got on well with everyone and that I'd be able to relate to everyone very easily, and found one person in our China business I really struggled with to the extent that I was worried about seeing them in the office and this kind of thing. And that wasn't like me. And I realized the way in which I dealt with this experience was to try and find innovative, different ways to connect with them. And again, my colleagues helped me realize that this was quite interesting, or maybe unique about my approach. I also shared stories about my proudest moment. This was one of the things that was difficult to do for many Anglo-Saxon types out there, but I managed to relate a story of where I was due to run a workshop. I'd be testing out some of the material on colleagues and other people. And one influential colleague had really poo-pooed an idea I had to show a video that helped provide some color to the subject. And right up until before I was going to run the workshop, I had taken the video out because I thought, I should listen to what they thought. And on the way actually to running the workshop, I suddenly decided, no, I should put this video back in, because I really believed that it added the right kind of energy to the workshop. So I remember arriving at the workshop venue, trying to connect to the Wi-Fi, trying to re-download this video that I'd now deleted. I was hiding behind the big screen in the room before I would walk out in front of the audience, frantically watching, as the file downloaded. Got the video in, ran the workshop with the video, and actually got sort of a standing ovation from some of the most influential stakeholders there who just loved the video. And that for me was a really proud moment, because I realized that I'd stuck by what I believed, was really going to work. And it was a bit of an innovative, different approach, but I thought it was bring the right energy. And the last story we shared was around our hobbies and interests that we have sort of outside of the Unilever day-to-day. And there I shared a little bit about some of my embarrassing hobbies, which are around dancing a bit to techno music as it happens, and having lots of fun at parties. But again, it's all about trying to get everyone at the party to have a good time. And after telling these stories, that was how this phrase about bringing the essence of Pollyanna into the room came about, because my colleagues, not my colleagues, helped me realize that there was this common thread running through all my stories, that I enjoy bringing joy to situations. I enjoy innovating. I enjoy doing all the things that Pollyanna liked doing in the book, helping people see a different way of doing things, and a way that was maybe a bit more joyful than their current experience, seeing things with new eyes. So that's how I came up with that phrase. And for me, it was a beautiful example of what Sarah shared earlier, how it became my anchor, and it was greater than my fear. Because my fear at the time was a little bit of actually that being Pollyanna wasn't appropriate in the business context, that actually I should hide Pollyanna away, because being that joyful, crazy, bounce off the wall energy kind of guy maybe wasn't right, that I should hide that light and be a bit more professional and focused on things. And so it gave me the permission, when I realized this is what's unique about me, this is what I'm passionate about, this is my strength. I allowed myself the permission to live into that and make sure that I did shine my light, because people said that's what they enjoyed about me and saw as something that I could bring to the party that no one else could. And so I had a conversation with my line manager at the time and said to them, listen, I've been on this workshop. This is what I've discovered about myself. And actually, I realized that if Unilever wants to get the best from me, then if I can be put in situations or projects or roles in which I can bring more of myself into the role, that inspiration, that joy, that kind of thing, then Unilever is going to benefit and I'll benefit because I'll be in the zone. You know, as Sarah writes in her book, that's what it's all about. You know, when you're living in your purpose, you're really in the zone, you're in flow. And to my line managers' credit, they really took me at my word and have since then placed me in positions in Unilever where I can thrive, you know, because I'm able to live my purpose. I've been head of our leadership development programs, which was all about bringing inspiration to our senior leaders. I helped design our new standards of leadership. I've helped actually design more around our purpose workshops and how we could roll that out to more people in the organization. And now I'm in a role where I'm looking after our approach to the future of work. And again, there we all hear about the robots are coming and automation is going to take away jobs and a lot of doom and gloom around social inequality and everything that's going on out there. And part of the reason I've been cast in that role now is how can I bring some hope and optimism to this? How can we show that actually being more human, being more purposeful is actually more important in the future, and that actually if we live into that, we've got more chance of succeeding and having the robots and things augment the work we do rather than take it away. So that's a little bit of my story. I thought that might be useful as context. We'll share a couple of slides with you now just to talk a little bit about the overall journey of purpose within Unilever and how we've looked to embed that within our culture. So excuse me as I just put a couple of slides up. There we go. All right. So how have we been igniting purpose at Unilever? And this is a journey that we've been on actually since 2010. Paul Polman was our CEO at that time, and he did a wonderful job of helping us reconnect with our founders' purpose. I'm just checking that my slides are moving. This worked when we prepared earlier. There we go. Now it's worked again. So he helped us really connect with our founders' purpose. And as Sarah mentioned, actually, when Unilever was first started back in the late 1800s, our founder, Lord William Lever, made as his purpose to make cleanliness commonplace. As Sarah said, this was at a time when cholera was ravaging the UK, and actually soaps and that kind of thing were only the preserve of the rich. The everyday man or woman could not afford soap. And so cholera was literally ravaging communities. And Lord Lever invented the soap, Sunlight soap, soon followed by Lifebuoy soap. Household names that probably most of you recognize now. But he invented these to be cheap and accessible to the everyday man and woman so that cleanliness would become commonplace. We could stop the spread of disease and encourage good hygiene habits. And what Paul Polman did for us back in 2010 was he helped reinvent that founder's purpose a little bit to become our future purpose, and reinvented to talk about making sustainable living commonplace. We are now a big global organization in 190 countries across the world, and he felt that we could have a bigger, more overarching purpose because through our brands, we impact 2 billion people every day. And he felt that we could help 2 billion people make sustainable living choices, make choices that are good for the environment and good for society through our brands. And so that's a purpose journey that he started us on. It's built on these 3 beliefs that companies with purpose last. And just to throw one stat out there, there was a Deloitte 2019 Insights report that reported that those companies that really have embedded purpose in their strategy and use it as a key ingredient in decision-making have higher market share gains and grow 3 times faster than their competitors with higher employee satisfaction and engagement. So that's our belief as well, that if we embed purpose in our strategy and that sort of thing, we are going to achieve superior performance for all our stakeholders. The second belief we have is that brands with purpose grow. And again, there was a report from the Meaningful Brands Index last year as well that reported over the last 10 years, meaningful brands, and I'll describe what those are in a moment, outperformed the stock market by 206%. So again, we believe that brands with purpose, so brands that do more than just have a functional benefit. So soaps clean, and that's a functional benefit of a soap. But for example, Lifebuoy's purpose is all around how do we help instill hygienic habits across the world. And that purpose is born out of the whole purpose around making cleanliness commonplace. We still have many countries in the world, India is an example, where things like cholera and these sorts of diseases are still way too commonplace. And for example, the Lifebuoy program in India is all about helping young children reach the age of 5, because we found that if they're able to reach the age of 5, their chances of then growing up to adulthood are heightened dramatically. And the reason it's about getting to the age of 5, it's about instilling good hygiene habits from an early age in children, making sure that they're washing their hands regularly so that they don't contract diseases. So Lifebuoy runs a massive program in India as a result, going into schools, going into creches and things to help educate young kids there around the importance of having clean hands. Last year during the COVID outbreak, obviously Lifebuoy was in high demand and everyone knew about washing hands and that sort of thing. And the team put out a public service announcement across the world and all the countries in which we operate with Lifebuoy. It didn't have any branding on it at all. So it didn't say Lifebuoy anywhere, but it was just a public service announcement to say to people, please make sure that you washing your hands in whichever way you have possible to prevent the spread of this virus. And I think that's another example of how it's a brand with purpose. It didn't feel the need to put out a Lifebuoy announcement that you need to wash your hands and use it as an advertising opportunity. It was born more out of the brand's purpose, which is to make hygienic habits commonplace. So that's an example for us of a brand with purpose. We've seen brands like Lifebuoy, like Dove, another one of our brands, grow much faster than the rest of our brands that we have that may not yet have a strongly embedded purpose. And so we're on a mission to make sure that all our brands have a good social and environmental mission. And then lastly, people with purpose thrive. This is a strong belief and one that I'll spend a bit of time on now. I actually loved a quote from Sarah's book that I just want to read out that for me epitomizes what we believe around people with purpose thrive. It's a quote from David White. And it says, companies need the contributing vitality of all the individuals who work for them in order to stay alive in the sea of changeability in which they find themselves. And I think I couldn't have said it better. That's our belief. And it's summed up as people with purpose thrive. You know, we are all in this VUCA world at the moment, probably never more so than we've ever been, and it's probably going to continue changing faster than it ever has before. And purpose is that anchor for us. It's a bit of a compass as well, that North Star that helps guide people through these changing times. And we believe that if we can help instill in our people, all of our people, the sense of purpose, what is their unique contribution that they can make, then they've got a far better chance of navigating this changing world that they see in front of them, just like I was able to do with my bringing the essence of Pollyanna into the room. So back in 2010, when we launched our new purpose around making sustainable living commonplace, we then started running the series of senior leader workshops to help all our top 700 leaders get in touch with their purpose, just as I had done. And we called it very unimaginatively the Unilever Leadership Development Program, but it did what it said on the tin. It was all about developing our senior leaders to become leaders of the future within Unilever, and for all of them to get in touch with their purpose, their unique contribution. Because our CEO, Paul Polman, believed that if people got in touch with their own purpose, they would understand the power of purpose and then buy into the overall Unilever purpose more as well. It wasn't about aligning people to the overall company purpose. This was very much about activating people's individual purpose and simply unleashing the power of that into their jobs and into their leadership. And I must say, it was an extremely successful program. Kudos to Jonathan Donner, who was our head of leadership development at the time, who designed the program. We had leaders coming out of there just full of joy, sharing their purpose with their teams, helping their teams understand their purpose, and really leading from a place of purpose. And Unilever's results show the impact of that it had on our company. You can see how the share price improved over that period of time. And a lot of it was that we just had a renewed energy and vigor from our leaders. And an interesting debate started happening within the organization around 2017 between a group of leaders who said, wow, this purpose thing is so cool. We need to get it out to everybody in the organization as fast as possible. And then another group of leaders who were saying, well, it's really hard to do this at scale. And we're worried that we're going to sacrifice quality if we go for quantity. Because obviously we couldn't afford to run the same kind of program for the entire organization that we were doing for the small group of senior leaders. We're an organization of around 150,000 people. So to do this at scale was going to be quite an undertaking. So we ran a series of experiments. We did some in the UK, in the Nordics, in Indonesia, with running shortened versions of this workshop, and to see, could we achieve the same results? I'm proud to say now that we did manage to design a workshop that could go across the entire organization. And over the last 3 years, we've helped over 55,000 of our people discover their purpose. And you can see a few insights from the workshops there. I'm particularly proud of the first one, that 92% of participants say they're inspired to go the extra mile in their work, versus 33% of those who haven't participated in the workshop yet. So it just shows that significantly more people are inspired and inspired to really go the extra mile in their work once they've gone through these workshops. And to see 100% of participants out of 55,000 recommending this workshop to others, I haven't seen that statistic too often. But it's not so much just about the workshop itself. We keep hearing stories from our people themselves that say that this day that they spend on this workshop is probably their best day that they've had in Unilever. There's a lot of magic that happens in a small group of 4 people sharing their stories together, helping one another discover their purpose. And that goes on to build really strong bonds within the organization, crossing functional boundaries, crossing geographic boundaries. It's really been amazing to see it happen. Last year with COVID, we unfortunately couldn't run the workshops face-to-face anymore. And we sort of thought, oh dear, this is going to be the end of them, until we started experimenting doing them virtually and realized, wow, we can actually run a fantastic workshop virtually as well. So now the workshops are run virtually, and now we get even more people signing up for them. So that's been a great barrier that's been released and unlocked for us. Just to say as well, these workshops then also led us to really rethink our standards of leadership, which you see there in the bottom of the screen. And Sarah talks about this in her book as well, that we firm believers that there's an inner and an outer game of leadership. And we really need to get that inner game right if we're going to succeed in the outer game. And for us, the inner game is all starts from purpose and service. How do we help our people discover their purpose, and how do we help them put that into the service of others? When we do that, we know that we're coming from a place of authentic leadership, a place where we can really make a difference in the organization. And that's some of the ongoing journey that we're going on around deepening the impact of purpose and making sure that everyone in the organization has the opportunity to discover their purpose. So we've now created a version for our factory employees as well, so that they can also do it. We've also created some purpose in action workshops to help our people see how they can really bring their purpose to work and in their lives. We've established team purpose workshops. Sarah highlighted the importance of those as well, to bring teams together. And then really helping our leaders think about how purpose can really nurture their leadership legacy. So we're helping them think about what's the legacy that they want to leave, and how does that relate to the purpose that they have at the moment. So these are some further ways that we've gone about embedding it in the organization, coupled with making sure that it's firmly embedded as one of our standards of leadership that we want everyone to aspire to. And then lastly, we've really linked it into my current job now around the future of work. So now what we have happening is that we ask everyone to go through this purpose workshop and understand what their purpose is. So they really get a strong handle on who they are, what are they good at, what do they want to do. And then we encourage them to think about the skills that they want to develop in line with that. We call that their future fit plan. So we ask them to think about, in terms of all of our functions and roles, we've identified what are the future fit skills we need as an organization to succeed in future. And we ask people to then look at those future fit skills and identify which ones they're most keen to develop based on their purpose. It might mean that they upskill in their current role to improve that performance in that current role, but it might also mean, in line with their purpose, that they want to change their role and therefore reskill into another role, maybe even inside or outside Unilever. And those are the different routes that we are trying to make available to our employees to keep them future fit and to make sure that we're taking a more positive approach and an approach where they are the agents of change and determining their futures rather than having change done to them, which is a sort of existing rhetoric on the future of work that, you know, jobs are at risk and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit of how I've tried to, again, bring my purpose into my current role, which is around how do I help people rethink their future fit plan and make the most of it in line with their purpose. So I'm going to stop sharing there now and yeah, leave some opportunity for us to do some Q&A together on that. So I think now I hand over to you, Chip, to lead us in the Q&A.
Perfect. Only if I could find my buttons on my screen. Thank you very much, Patty, for that inspiring story from your journey to Unilever's journey on driving more purpose, not just in the organization, but also in people's lives, which I think it's becoming more and more important. And I was just going to share a story that I've shared with Patty and Sarah before of how different organizations are trying to scale up their work on purpose and to drive it through to the hire to retire life cycle of their employees. So there's organizations that embed purpose type of work in the onboarding of employees into the organization. It connects them deeper with the purpose of the organization, but also makes the relationship between the employer and the employee almost like open for understanding that we're both here for the benefit to benefit each other. You might spend 5, 10, 15 years with us as in employment, but we're here to support you to grow as an individual, to achieve that purpose that you have on this planet, of what you want to bring to the world, as well as the time that you're spending here is actually contributing to the purpose of the organization. And there's a bit of alignment and symbiotic relationship between the individual purpose and the organizational purpose. And the example of organizations I would think of is an organization called Mind Valley that's in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And they do this from the moment people are getting onboarded up until they get promoted in specific roles or progress through the organization. They constantly have these purpose conversations. They have a very open and honest conversation. They put boards on the individual purpose of employees on their walls. So basically their office is basically paved with the experiences of people that are in that space. And also they make it quite public for other colleagues to come in to say, I see what you're trying to do with what your purpose is on this planet, and I want to help out, or I have something that might be able to help, or I found a moment of connection between what I'm here to do on this planet and what you're here to do on this planet, which I think it's beautiful from a human connection as well, beyond the working relationship. Now, enough about me, because I haven't enough stories to fill a lifetime of these sort of examples. What I wanted to go through is we're going to pick up some of the questions that have already been put into the chat and hear from Paddy and Sarah on their thoughts on how we address some of these. And I think there was a question around, in the context of organizations already having a clear and established purpose. And I think through the conversation, we've already answered part of this. but what is there more to do? So if you take organizations like the NHS that already has a clear purpose, what is there more to do in the context of that employees? And just to cover, we've already went through the example of organizations going back to their purpose to understand how they can bring that to life and what is still relevant in the work that they're doing today, as well as what Paddy mentioned, these workshops that are dedicated to employees to uncover and release the individual purpose of people within the workplace, but also inspire them in how they contribute to the organizational purpose. Any other thoughts or ideas besides the two that I just mentioned, Sarah or Patrick?
I'm happy to share a response. I mean, I think it's a great question, and I work with some not-for-profits that have a very clear purpose, and I'm also thinking of government departments that I'm in conversation with in the civil service, again, a clear purpose. And there is work to do still. In terms of those organisations being really thriving places for their employees. And I think that purpose is necessary but insufficient on its own to create a thriving culture. So you might, for example, even with a strong purpose, you might find, I've come across this staff data revealing levels of bullying in the organisation. And that would need to be addressed, of course, in order for people to thrive. And I've also seen in, say, the not-for-profit sector, clear purpose, and the leadership team struggling to have some of the conversations they really need to have. Maybe that's about budget or headcount. So there's still work to do, even with a strongly articulated purpose, in my experience.
I'd agree. I'll just add something very quickly. It's exactly on your point, Sarah, that a good question to ask is how embedded is the purpose in the key decision-making in the organization? So how much is the purpose actually informing the decisions that are made? That's always a good acid test to check on that. So yeah, that might be worth asking as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Patty and Sarah. The next question is one that's a bit controversial. So if you're going through a purpose workshop, whether within the context of Unilever or you're doing this and you're working for different organizations or with the different organizations, what happens when someone discovers a purpose which takes them away from the organization?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I mean, we have a lot of those examples happening in Unilever, and I think not that we're always happy about it, but I think we're happy for the individual, because if they discover that actually their purpose is outside Unilever, we know that probably whilst they've been in Unilever and unable to really live their purpose fully, they haven't been all that they can be, and Unilever probably hasn't been getting all that Unilever would like to get from them. So it's far better that they are in a place where they can fully live and breathe their purpose and make a difference. So yeah, well, I think we're quite pragmatic about it. I think again, you know, the risk of not doing it and not helping people discover their purpose is greater than the risk of, you know, some people leaving and moving on to other pastures. It's like the story about learning and development. You know, if you don't do any learning and development because you think everyone's going to leave, then you're going to be left with people, yeah, you know, who are not going anywhere.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe if I can just add to that, and I think Paddy's spoken to it really well, it's a realistic outcome that some people in exploring their purpose might decide to leave the organisation. I know I've been in coaching work with some individuals that have really been grappling with that. And sometimes what they do is strengthen their ability to have conversations, whether with their line manager or other colleagues, and bring in the kind of the job crafting angle. And I think Paddy covered this beautifully in his own example of shaping your job so that you can thrive more in your existing organisation. And I think the reality is that's not always possible. So people might be leaving, and there's a way of leaving well and having a good ending too.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't want to keep someone from their potential of doing something that is connected with their purpose. If the organization can find a way to fulfill part of that, or to fulfill that the whole purpose of that individual, that's great, because that drives advocacy and commitment and like extra effort from that person, and them being passionate about what they do. But if you're keeping them away from purpose, is almost like I have a responsibility towards that individual to support them, to set them free and guide them into, this is what you need to do. Perfect. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to pick up the next question, which is more around, I think that going through COVID-19 and the global pandemic, and this is a question directed to Paddy. Has Unilever observed these workshops to actually positively impact on employee mental well-being?
Yes, is the very short answer. So we actually saw, interestingly, in our people surveys that we did during the pandemic, that actually in many places we saw, mental well-being, particularly emotional well-being, actually we had improvements in it. Not just because of the workshops, I hasten to add, but actually because of one of Sarah's other sort of capacities that she speaks about around the authentic and open conversation. So our leaders suddenly realized that they really needed to stay more connected to people. And so instead of maybe having a town hall once a quarter or something, we started having them weekly and really having open dialogues with people. We had an anonymous survey, an anonymous question service built into that. So anyone could ask any question of our leaders. The questions would get voted up by participants, and our leaders would need to answer them. And through that transparency, that openness and honesty, we actually saw people feeling a whole lot more settled about what was Unilever's approach, how were we doing through the pandemic and all that sort of thing. I'd love to say that the workshops contributed a little bit. I can't say for sure how much impact the workshops had, but what I do think the impact they did have is because we were able to still run them, and because there's such an intimate experience between 4 individuals from different places and functions across the organization, I think it helped people create new connections that they might not have had, and new people they could rely on to support them as we were all journeying through the pandemic last year. So yeah, definitely they help.
And maybe if I can just quickly add to that as well, some recent research by, he's called John Rosling. He's a colleague of Victoria Hur, so connected with the University of Cambridge. What they have found over the last year is that the uplift in performance from being connected with purpose is 3 times stronger for remote workers than their office-based colleagues. And they're saying maybe it's because, in these socially distanced times, purpose helps connect people emotionally with their work, which is why on the remote workers, you're getting more of that uplift. So that's John Rosling at Contexus, his research.
Nice, I like that. And that actually is a great segue into the next question, where we've already covered a bit of the well-being element and the connection and the advocacy to the organization. But what else is there as quantifiable measures that can be put in place around purpose? And the KPIs companies could or should be looking at from a behavior analysis perspective. And I think, Paddy, you had a list in your presentation as well.
Yes, I did.
Discretionary effort.
Yes, so there's those sorts of things: discretionary effort, engagement, inclusion. Those sorts of elements are sort of, I would say, the fairly common ones. In fact, we are at the moment doing a longitudinal study with London School of Economics that we started back in 2017. looking at the productivity impact as well of the purpose workshop. So there we're looking at metrics like customer satisfaction, like productivity in terms of our factory employees working on the lines, a number of continuous improvement ideas that they bring to the fore, those kinds of metrics as well. So we're looking at a few more of the harder business metrics, if you like, and trying to see if we can see if there's a correlation or causal relationship between our purpose workshops and the sort of effect it has on the teams and colleagues and ways of working that then results in greater productivity as well. But I would say definitely your well-being measures, your engagement measures, your inclusion and diversity measures as well should all be measures that you should look at to look at the impact of purpose as well.
And Paddy, you mentioned earlier about decision making as well, and slightly different angle, but interesting data that BCG, Boston Consulting Group, did some research amongst tech companies. And they went in and asked people how likely the company would they turn down an opportunity that was going to be profitable, but not in line with the company's purpose. And they found a kind of worryingly high proportion of people in the tech companies were saying that would actually be the case. And I think that really underlines what Paddy was saying there about if it's like a really true, and it's being truly lived in the organisation, that will show up in the decisions being made. So that would be another metric of sorts.
Nice. I like that. Thank you very much. Now the final question is almost like what can purpose work be doing to support the education system? So thinking about people that are currently in education, soon to be or future employees, just currently going through a global pandemic that affects not just organization, but also the education system significantly. What can purpose work be doing to support the education system and the people going through it?
Yeah, just one quick comment I'll make here. So I ran a workshop quite recently, actually, and it was for a number of apprentices who were working in Unilever. So they're still in education. And they were quite bashful in the workshop because they were saying, well, I'm quite young and I don't really know that I've got a purpose yet and need more sort of experience. I said, no, don't worry. You're through the storytelling, you'll find it. And anyway, at the end of the workshop, they all had a really strong, amazing purpose statement. And so I think, first of all, I just want to say that I do think it's important that in our education systems and things like that we do have some focus on purpose and help young people particularly start getting in touch with that, because it'll help them think a whole lot more clearly about the work that they want to do and where they are going to be thriving, rather than just kind of going for the first jobs available. So I do think it's important. I think there is ample opportunity in both schools and higher education to do some of this work together. It's very simple, actually. At the end of the day, it's a bit of storytelling. Everyone loves that, and it just helps people think about their purpose a bit more clearly.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what Paddy said, and I'll just share a quick example of something that inspired me recently. So it's an organization in the States called True Colors, based in a city in North Carolina. And they came into being following a killing on the street for sort of rival gangs. And what True Colors do is they brew beer and they employ gang members. So they bring together young people from rival gangs to brew the beer, to spark a different kind of conversation. And when I heard their chief people officer, she's called Kalila, she was a guest speaker at a Purpose Collective session, I felt so inspired about the potential for purpose amongst young people and in difficult social situations as well. So True Colors, look them up, it's very inspiring.
Perfect. We have a few more questions, but our time is up. So I think I'm going to hand some of those questions to Paddy and some to Sarah as soon as we finish the questions. There are questions around, Paddy, if you can describe more of what's happening in those workshops, or Sarah to share some of the resources and links that you already mentioned in the presentation. But thank you very much to both of you for joining me tonight. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you here exploring this topic. I think we can spend weeks on weeks talking about purpose and how we nudge organizations into the right direction, and how we shift this from the people profession as well. So as people professionals, we're uniquely positioned in organizations to actually nurture the organizational culture, to influence leadership into the right direction, and create this purpose for all employees.